All right, guys, welcome back to another episode. This is episode 53 of Within Tolerance with Dylan and I. And today we got a bunch of questions from you guys. So thank you for submitting all these. We got some really interesting ones. And I guess quick shop updates from Dylan and I. Dylan, you want to go ahead and do that first?
Yeah, sure. Not much has changed since the last time we spoke. For everybody that was asking, no, I still haven't put the orange subplate on. Um, we've just been super busy. I think last time I was talking to you after we talked to John that I've just been slammed and like kind of digging myself out of a hole of work that I've had. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Like it. It's been nonstop, and I'd much rather be busy than not busy. But it's definitely been. I'm ready for a break where I can kind of catch my breath for a day or two. So that's kind of where I'm working towards. I think I'll be out of the hole that I'm in by Sunday or Monday next week, and then I've still got orders on the books, but nothing that's like I've got a million things that are like either you know very nearly due or a couple that are past due that I just need to get done. So I'm just working through those.
Yeah, like you said, good problem to have, really.
Yeah. Oh yeah, totally. And it was really all of the panic was kind of due to COVID, just because I had a bunch of customers that I think they were kind of waiting to see what everything was going to be, and so they didn't place orders for like 3 weeks, 3 or 4 weeks.
Okay.
And if you go back in the podcast, maybe I don't know 2 or 3 episodes ago when we were talking ago, or like 2 or 3 times that we were talking ago, I even said that like that we were kind of dead, and then all of a sudden, one of my customers started giving me a whole bunch of work that was like, oh, take your time on it, blah blah blah, and then like a week after that happened, the sky just opened up and like every customer came back online and was like, oh shoot, now we got to make up for lost time, so here's all these rush orders, and so it's just been nonstop. But yeah, good problem to have, just stressful. So
Yeah, and then I guess on my hand, I've been doing. I'm trying to think, because yeah, we haven't talked in 2 weeks, really. Trying to think. I just got the material for this UV printing fixture idea that I talked about. I think it was last week that we talked, or 2 weeks ago. And so I got this big 5/8 plate that's 10 by 18 inches. So I have to take my vices off, mount that. I'm probably just gonna deck like 10 thou off one side, flip it, like elevate it on some 1, 2, 3 blocks, cut the perimeter actually to 10 inches by 18 because it's oversized, and then deck it again, and then drill and ream a bunch of 1/4 inch holes in different spots. And then on top of those are going to go some little Delrin, like little pallets with, they'll just have pressed fit in 1/4 inch dowel pins, and it'll be a cool little system. I posted a little picture on my Instagram story today. So I'm really excited to get that going and done.
yeah, I'm super pumped for you for that. That's going to be, I think, a real life changer for you as far as UV printing goes.
Yeah, the only thing I'm worried about is getting it set up on the printer itself, because I've had problems in the past where there's multiple different print modes you can use. So it'll, like, let's say you're printing on a coffee mug, right? It's not a flat surface, but it can do it. It can only go to a certain extent, right? Because otherwise the ink starts to fall off and you get what we call like fall off and it gets blurry. And that's simply because the ink droplets aren't heavy enough to go down that far. And there's different modes that can make the droplets thicker or thinner, or you could do clear coats or no clear coats, or there's all these different settings. And I found with the two settings I use the most, like I could have something fixtured on a Lego fixture and switch between print modes, and just me switching between print modes moves my artwork.
Oh,
And
really?
I don't know if I haven't checked, but I don't know if it's like a repeatable, like it's a 1/4 inch up and a 1/4 inch left, or, but I need to figure that out. And then the other thing is, I'm assuming how do I get this thing on the printer straight? And I think my best bet is to put it on there up against, there's a couple like reference edges, and then print just like an L-shaped line that's like really thin onto the actual fixture, and just keep adjusting the fixture until it actually lines up with the edge. Like I'm just going to be printing on the aluminum.
Yeah, I think that's your best bet. And then like your fall off problem, I would do testing with every palette, and then whatever settings work for it and like whatever offsets work for it, I would just pull that back off the printer and go and engrave all that stuff into the Delrin.
Yeah, or just print on the Delrin.
Oh yeah, I guess that's totally true.
Yeah.
I always forget how durable that printing is.
Yeah, so I don't know. That's like my only concern because once you get past that, it's like making a fixture just to hold some parts. It's not like they're being clamped down as long as they don't wiggle around. I mean, it's like most of the stuff's plus or minus, I would say 1 or 2 thou, which I guess actually is somewhat tight tolerance work. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's not. I can't overcomplicate it. So that's like the only worry is that alignment issue. But I think I might call them and see if that's a bug in the software. I don't know, but I've heard people talk about it, and it's not just me. So,
Hmm. Yeah, that is pretty interesting.
but yeah, I mean that's about the extent. Like you said, we're both just pretty busy and we're just keep on keeping on.
You still printing a whole bunch of Grimm's Brothers?
Yeah, those those I'm done printing, but I finished packaging them probably last week, and then they're just all inventoried. And I think I want to say 70 total sets of figures. I sent John 15 of each figure, and so and then I kept a set. And so it's going to come down to there's like 60 sets, and that's about what I wanted cuz he made 60 of those pandemic knives. So there's not many out there. So whatever's left on my site is what's ever left, and I'm not going to make more. So,
Well, you heard it here first, guys. Go
yeah,
get it if you want it because it's not going to last long. Especially with his
official.
most recent video, or his video yesterday. I have a feeling you're going to get the remainder sold this week.
Yeah, that was pretty cool that he was showing those off.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and some of those other ones I've done for people, I can't believe it's been like 4 years since I've done some of those.
Yeah, yeah, that's crazy. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's so funny because before we started the podcast, like I definitely knew who you were because I kept saying your Lego figurines pop up. Everybody was getting them. So
yep. And then at one point I did them officially for Fusion and Autodesk. They reached out to me, and I can't remember if who I directly worked with, but that was kind of cool to do like legit Fusion ones.
was it Kurt?
It might have been.
Yeah. So maybe that's why you haven't done them anymore because I think he's over at Ansys now.
That's what I thought. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, that's sweet, man. I'm pumped for you. That's really cool.
Yeah, so I guess should we get into these questions?
Yeah, sure. Some of them people dropped them late 2 weeks ago, and so I put them on the list. And then most of these are from yesterday and today, so we can just kind of run through them.
All right, I'm going to start at the bottom. H. Clark, Dream Car. What do you got, Dylan?
So I was actually thinking about this one because he sent this one over yesterday. Like, I mean, we already know of the two of us, I'm definitely the car guy, and so like
Yeah.
it's so hard to narrow down a dream car, but I think it's a McLaren F1, like the one from the '90s. If I had to have any car, I think that's it. I don't know.
Okay.
There's like a lot of runners up. Let's just say
Yeah.
that. So, what about you?
Okay. If Tesla's not on the list, like legit car, and this is pushing it because I don't know much about cars, but my dad has a 1957 Chevy Bel Air, um, and that was his dad, so my grandpa, and I love that like old classic car style, and I think I think it's a 55 Chevy that's a convertible, like all red with a white top that's a soft top. I think, and those are like some of the, I think, don't quote me on this, but I think that's one of like the most desirable ones out there, and I think that's just such a cool car.
Totally. Yeah, yeah. That's awesome.
All right, let's see. You pick a question now. There's so many.
Well, okay, so this guy has asked it a few times. He really wants to make sure we answer it. So, Mark Zero prototypes, and I'm spacing on his personal one, but he also asked it from his personal one. But he wanted us to kind of talk about the DT1 and DT2, and I guess just 30 taper in general. So, I think it was a little more geared towards me. But he was asking also, he's going to buy a DT2 or a VF2. And so my thoughts, I've never run a DT1 or a DT2. I don't think I'd ever buy a 30 taper machine, a new 30 taper machine without a big plus spindle ever again. And the Haas doesn't offer it on the DTs. So personally, I think you'd just be better off going with the VF2 because you'll get more rigidity out of the 40 taper. And like I we were talking over direct message, and like he likes the light, quick, nimble machines. And so if he's into that, maybe get a DM too.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean,
like
the DT and the DM is the same machine, just different spindles.
right. You've got the 40 instead of the 30, and realistically, like from what I've seen on his Instagram, he's doing a lot of titanium and stuff, and like I don't think you're going to gain anything by having a real high RPM BT30 spindle. Tool holders a little cheaper. That's about it. Like I don't know if they offered a big plus 15K or something like that on the Haas, I would be a little more torn, but without big plus or dual contact or whatever you want to call it, I just don't think it's worth it.
Yeah, that was my one thing is it's like what kind of parts do you make? If there's a lot of drilling and small tooling, then I feel like yeah, the DT would be great. Obviously, that's kind of what it's designed for, but if it's I don't know. I mean, titanium can be easily handled light and fast just like anything else. So,
Yeah, I don't know if there's a big price difference between the DT and the DM. I guess that would be the only other thing I haven't
I
looked at.
think it's like 10,000 different.
Yeah, I feel like if you're gonna buy a brand new machine, I don't know. Personally, like I said, without big plus, I just wouldn't go. I wouldn't go with the DT. I don't see any reason to.
Yeah,
Um,
just part dependent and then of like volume. If you're making a boatload of parts, the VF2 is definitely going to be slower, but
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I guess that's the only other thing. The VF2 over the DM2 would be you can get more tools in the VF, right? Those are
depends. Yeah, I
20 or
think if
something.
it's just a VF2, the standard one, yeah, you get two more.
Yeah. So I guess those are the only other things. And it's a little more X travel than your machine too.
Yeah.
But so yeah, that's those are my thoughts. I love 30 taper. I'm a big proponent of it, but now having a 30 taper big plus spindle, it's like leaps and bounds over a standard 30 taper spindle. So go ahead, you're up.
We got let's see. NS Precision says, what are the best 3D printable upgrades slash organizations for the shop? And then he also has toilet paper over or under and why. uh,
Go for it.
let's see. 3D printable upgrades. Just like general stuff, obviously just like collet, organizers, end mill storage. It's really about it I can think of.
Yeah, I think just like bins of any kind are always super helpful. I have that one from Brad Southard that he sent me that like you is all parametric, so you can change the size real easy, and they all stack and stuff like that. Collet organizers, I've made like at work a micrometer and caliper holder. Um, I think like I've told you, I print out a whole bunch of inspection fixtures at work for our CMM. Like that's super handy.
Yeah.
Just like to hold odd parts or whatever, and most of the time I can design them during the very end of the day, print them, and they're ready the next morning. And so it's like, okay, now I can inspect the part that I need to or whatever. Yeah, I've made a ton of organizers both at my shop and at work. Uh, Really, it's just like any of the things that you're like, oh, I've got a great idea for this, but I don't want to waste spindle time. They're great for,
Yeah.
and like you can press hardware into them too. Like I press, I'll either like print like at work I've got the form 2, and so I'll print holes at the miter diameter and then go and tap them with a real tap, and like the holes hold screw threads really well. Like I can't torque them or anything like that, but if I'm just holding down a part with a clamp, like it works totally fine. So yeah, there's a lot of things that you can do to add strength. You can make slots to press nuts into. You can do all kinds of stuff to make sure that the hardware side of it is all physical metal stuff, and then just the shape is 3D printed.
Yeah, and then toilet paper over and under and why. Honestly, the second part of that question is the hardest, and why. Um, I would say over because it's just right there.
Yeah, I've seen this debate before, and like, I just don't care,
Yeah, that
like,
too.
like at all. I was thinking about that today too, and I was like, maybe over. I think maybe I put it over instinctually, but I have zero reason, and like, if it's under, it doesn't make me upset. I think I've maybe noticed in the past that if it's under, it unravels a little bit easier.
That's
Um,
true. But then I also feel like, first of all, can we just take a moment and realize we're really debating this?
Yeah, I know. That's the thing. It's like, man, as long as there is toilet paper when I go to the bathroom, that's all I really care about. I don't care
I
which way
guess
it comes out.
I guess the only thing is, like, if it's closer to the wall, like, I don't know, then the wall gets dirty. I don't know what's going down, but, like,
Yeah, I don't know. I'm sorry, I don't have a better answer, but like, man, as long as there is a like, I don't even need a roll holder. As long as there is a roll of toilet paper that I can use, that is all I care about when I'm going to the bathroom. Not how it presents itself to me.
yeah.
Um, it could be coming out of a clown's face like as a tongue, and I don't care. Like, I just
What kind of bathrooms have you been to?
I'm just like trying to imagine the most ridiculous thing ever. Like, I care so little about the way the toilet paper presents itself to me. And granted, I've heard arguments for, I think, under, because it's like harder for animals to get to it, maybe, or maybe it was over. I don't know. I remember one of them. Somebody was like, "Oh, well, my cat can really get it if it's like this, but they can't get it if it's like
No, I could
this."
see that. Yeah, my dog
Um,
will go in there and get it.
yeah, so I understand those. And if you've got a strong feeling, you know what, I will never fight you about it. But yeah, I just don't care.
Yep. Moving on.
Yeah. All right. Oh, this one cut deep when I saw it. And it's from Chris, the pragmatic redneck, and he said, "Will Peyton get a probe before Dylan gets the orange vices installed?"
That's a great question.
So my timeline, like I said, I should be done with my current behind work like early next week, and then I have to get the AC fixed in my car, and then I'm all orange until it's done.
And just for the people listening, Dylan and I had a conversation. I think it was last week after we had John on, and I was like telling him like he's gonna regret not putting this on, and because I was asking Dylan like, what is the holdup? Is it like just spindle time? I mean, and I was just genuinely curious, like, is there more than just like slapping it on and bolting it down that I'm missing? And I guess you could go into that a little bit.
Yeah. So I need both Brad and I there because the thing weighs like, I don't know, 250 or 300 pounds with all the 0 point stations on it. So we need to borrow a engine hoist, and I need him there to help me guide it in. And so I've got to pull off my tool setter. I have to remake the tool setter mount to fit on one of the 0 point stations. I've got to recoat my entire table in the dry moly lube, and then I've got to place it and indicate it in and all that stuff. And then in addition, I've also had a lot of work lately that I've been using both orange vices, both 6-inch orange vices next to each other, and like clamping large, long, 14, 16-inch pieces in. And with my current setup, I was thinking about this more too after we talked. I might be able to use my original Gen 1 vice and my aluminum Gen 4 vice together. But like right now on the Brother, I've got my Gen 4 vice and my double station, and like I can align them so that the jaws line up perfectly, and I can just indicate them in. But on the subplate, I will be locked into the ball lock couplers on the bottom of the vices, and so I don't think that the jaws will line up. So
Okay.
I'll either have to have custom jaws made so they do line up, or I'll have to figure something out. I don't know. That's been one. I don't want to say nerve wracking, but like I have been using both of them together so much recently that I've just been like kind of putting it off because I know that I like for example, I just finished a 12 or 13-inch long Delrin part last week, three of them, and then the customer reordered more of them this week. And so I was like, oh well, if I had put it on this last week, I would. And granted, like I also thought about it, and I was like, oh well, I could cut soft step jaws on two of the delta vices and handle stuff like that as long as it wasn't wider, then I can open the deltas. So there's ways around it, and we'll get it done. Like if we need to buy another orange, I'm never gonna regret that decision. So we'll just have to see. But
Yeah.
it is like very high on my to do list. I keep seeing it. I'm like, I just need to get that done because I do really, really want to start just using, the container method and moving through with that kind of stuff and simplifying my programming and all that.
Yeah, and we actually had a question about that from Kyle, and he says, "Have you guys looked into the Rob Lockwood container method that he showed at AU?" And
Oh no,
we've
that was
talked about this.
Linus Follinger.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, we've talked about that. I'm pretty sure multiple times, haven't we?
Yeah, that's what I told him. I told him we talk about the new tool library because that just came out yesterday or today.
Okay.
And so I looked into it a little bit. I haven't used it at all yet, but like the new tool library looks sick if it works well.
I honestly haven't looked at it.
So now there are defaults, like you can set up defaults for different tool path and material types for each tool. And so they'll automatically populate when you bring them into those operations. So like if you use the same tool to rough and finish, you could have defaults set for rough and finish, and it knows like, oh, if you brought it into a 2D contour, use that default, and if you brought it into a 3D adaptive, use that default.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. So I haven't yet to play with it. I literally just updated Fusion last night, but I'm super looking forward to it. I'm hoping that there's no new weird bugs, but there's a lot of really cool things in the new update. There's also a manual inspection that's in preview where you can pick features on the part and create a manual inspection plan, and then put in what you measure with like calipers and mics and stuff, and then it'll create an inspection report for you, which is awesome. Like there are whole programs out there dedicated to that kind of stuff.
I was about to
So,
say, yeah.
there's a lot of awesome little things in the new update that I'm really excited to play with.
Yeah, I'll have to update mine.
Yeah, it was in preview for a while, and when I first looked at it in preview was like 3 months ago or 4 months ago, and man, there were some issues. But CJ Abraham, who works for Autodesk, did a whole video on just the tool library recently, and it looks like they fixed a lot of the issues, and there's some really nice sorting features, and it's different enough that I think I'm going to have a week or two of like stumbling around and trying to figure out where everything is, but I'm super excited for that.
Yeah, okay. NYDLS 30. We got considering a fourth, how do you hand jog? I guess I've thought about a fourth, but not anytime soon. And then hand jog, I guess I just hand jog.
So to clarify, sorry, he sent videos like, do you use your index finger on the little stub? Do you grip the wheel with your hand? Do you like put a finger on the face of it and jog like that? He had sent pictures to go along with it, which are kind of hard to, to convey over podcast.
I guess it depends on what I'm doing. If it's like the table's in the far back and I just want it there, like I'll just like freaking slap the thing and just spin it. Um, I never seem to use the little like nub thing, the little handle thing.
Yeah, I'll either spin it, or sometimes I'll use the handle thing to go really quick, and then I just grip it. Otherwise, when I'm like clicking through individual stuff.
Yeah.
And then as far as a fourth, I definitely want a fourth. We'll kind of see where everything lands. Like maybe once the kitties sold, we'll look into it. But I'd really love a fourth. Like we have the room for it. The orange subplate has provisions for it. I'd really, really love to add that capability to our shop. There's some parts recently that I finished for a new customer that I had to do a 4-station fixture to hit all the sides of the part versus just like loading them on a fourth and going. So,
And then does Peyton use Wi-Fi or USB? I use USB. And then what file naming convention do you use? Kind of depends. I mean, if I'm constantly improving something, it's just gonna just be random names, to be honest. And then if it's like a final file, I'll normally just name it like master or production or something.
So I do part number, op number, and then occasionally I'll do part number, op number, fix if I'm like just fixing one piece and I know that it's not going to be a production item. But for the most part, my folders are all organized by customer and then by part number, and then in the part number folder is all the programs, but it's usually just the ops that I have, or ops and softjaw ops, but that's it.
Yeah, and then in Fusion, I have one file for my company. Then inside that, I have like my own projects, and then like customers. And then within that, there's all the different customers, and all that jazz.
Yeah, yeah, and I also create a folder in each customer that is potential, and so I put all of my quoting files in there so they don't clutter up my customer files. Because I quote significantly more than I actually get. Well, not significantly more, but like there are certain customers that I've quoted 10 jobs and gotten one of them, and it's like I don't want to have to go searching for that one job if I need to remake it.
Yeah, makes sense.
Oh, and he also had asked, is it hearsay to hand jog rough clearing stock? So like using your CNC as a manual, more or less.
I see no reason not to. I mean, it's a machine, and a lot of people actually I know that do that.
Yeah, I cut so many soft jaws that way because like very often I use soft jaws just as an extended support for a long flat part. And so I'll cut a step for them to sit, and I always do that by hand. There's no way I'm gonna write a program. Yeah, unless I mean, if I came up with a good template where I could just update the size of the jaw, update the distance between them, and then go, which I probably should, I guess. But it's super easy just to, you know, touch off on the top with the tool spinning, go over to the side, and just start cutting steps. So
Yeah, and then just re-zero and go.
right, yeah, it's I don't know. I'm not sure if it's a diminishing return to have a template for that or not, but I'll have to look into it. Uh,
We got, let's see, T5 Manufacturing. What is your favorite brand of digital calipers? Mitutoyo all the way.
yeah, Midatoyo, uh, they're coolant proof IP67 ones. Like, yeah, it, that's it. Just get
Yeah,
those. Like,
yeah.
yeah,
Yes,
don't
they're $100, but that's gonna pay for itself. So
man, it's so worth it. And you know what? Like, I have 8-inch ones now at my shop, and I don't know that I would buy another 6-inch pair. The
yeah,
8-inch ones are even better because they're like not that much more unwieldy, but I measure so many more things now because I have them. Like 12-inch ones are a little too big to do that with, but like 8-inch seems to be a perfect size right now.
yeah,
Um, let's see. Firmworks Ltd asks, please explain the delta vices and how the little tooth bit works. So the tooth bits are, I want to say, an eighth inch step or a 16th inch step. I think it's a 16th inch step, and it allows you an eighth inch bigger stock because it center kind of faux centers the jaw. But versus like a fifth axis vice or something like that that's supposed to be self centering, those are known to have both jaw lift and inaccuracies in the actual centering mechanism. And depending on who you talk to, it's different amounts. I've heard up to 2 or 3 thou. So Eric over at Orange said, well, screw the self centering. I'll just make jaws one fixed jaw that I can increment, and then one that is a sliding jaw. And that's the whole kit and caboodle behind Delta Vice.
yeah. Let's see. We have one. So this one's from Kyle. Source for, let's see. Yeah, source for affordable carbide drills online. Uh, Honestly, I've been pretty lucky with MSC. There's a lot of OSG and Goering stuff on there. I mean, I think it's just easier to get than dealing with the distributor. So
Yeah, they're good. McMaster sells on their website. It's unbranded, but usually they are Goering drills. Goering, yeah. And so those they're usually a little cheaper because they don't sell them as a brand name. Uh, Dan's Discount Tools. I've bought some tools from them before, and they're pretty good. Like they don't obviously they they buy like surplus stock, and so they don't always have what you need. But if they have what you need, it's like super super cheap. Um, and they like Dan does a really good job over there. Uh, and yeah, like I guess MSC too. Like if you can get a good day of pricing, like where there's a great deal or something like that, like you can get things for pretty cheap. Same with Zorro. Like if you can get a 20% off or a 25% off day of Zorro and find what you need, that's a great thing. But unfortunately, I don't have like one source that is like my go-to for affordable carbide drill. I guess Mari Tool is actually pretty reasonable too for the carbide drills.
Yeah, that's
Uh,
true.
so that's another good one. But yeah, I think carbide drills and affordable don't usually really go together. And so
Yeah, seriously.
if you are going to need a specific size and you have to have it TSC or you have to have it this kind of coated, like you're probably going to pay. So yeah,
The
that's it.
name of the game.
Yep.
Let's see. What else we got?
T5 Manufacturing Co. What was your biggest takeaway from the podcast with John Grimsmo?
Uh, there's a lot to learn. I'm trying to think. Yeah, I mean, you can pretty much do anything in this trade. And, I really like the concept of, when he can show pretty much everything about making a knife, but you'll always be there's never going to be another Grimsmo brand because of you're buying his story. And I think he's done a great job of that. And that's, I think, really important to a lot of people starting out. I was messaging Split, the other guy that's like racing him to get a knife done. And, we were talking about that that's a really important part of, especially if you're working on a product, and you're not really a service business.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of people that buy from you just because they think it's cool that you're doing this and you're, as young as you are and you're a solo guy, that's, I feel like a big, maybe not a big part of your success, but like people love that story. They're like, oh man, he's so young and he's kicking ass and, doing this all out of his garage. And, I think people really appreciate that.
Yeah, I mean, it's just your personal brand. That is me.
Right, exactly. Yeah, it's not like you're putting on a facade. That is you, and you definitely show it in your stories and all that. So, um,
What about
I
you?
the biggest thing I took away is I need to get a handle on my numbers, and so I have a meeting
That's
with
true.
my accountant next Friday, and they're going to quote closing my books monthly because it was such a coincidence. So I think it was the day after we talked to Grimsmo. My friend, I've got a really good friend in Chicago that I call, or we talk maybe twice a week. It actually kind of reminds me of the bomb because he is another business owner in a trade totally outside of ours. Like he makes commercial LED lights for like gas stations and stuff. But he's a younger guy, entrepreneur. We get along really well, and we talk like once or twice a week just about business stuff. And like he's in a lot of business groups, and so has a lot of really good knowledge that he can impart. And like he's definitely further ahead in the business journey than I am. So he I can learn from a lot of his mistakes, which is fantastic. But like I think it was the day after we talked to John, he called me and we talked, and he was like, "You need to get in contact with your accountant now and get your books closed every month by an accountant. You need to stop this." And I was like, "Well, it's funny you say that because I'm totally already on board with that."
Yeah, that's weird.
Yeah, so it's gonna happen. My accountant, her daughter just recently took over. Like this last tax season, she was doing them, and my accountant's really, really good, but also really terrible at communication. And her daughter is way, way better at communication. So I'm even more jazzed about having her close our books for us. So yeah, that's gonna be awesome. It'll give me a goal to shoot for. I'll know that I need to make this much a month, and at maybe 3 or 4 months of doing that, I know I can go full time, or 6 months of that, I know I can go full time. And so it really will set things in perspective.
Yeah. Okay. We got. Let's see. What is this? I'm trying to see. We got built by Hutch. What do you guys use for chamfer tools? We've talked about this before. Tipped off chamfer tools. Pretty much Harvey tool, helical. Um,
I
those work great.
use Destiny for all of mine, all of my 3 flute at least. but same thing, tipped off. Like if you have the room for another tool, don't use a mill drill, pretty much. And I've also gone away from using mill drill for spot too. I now have a 120-degree spot drill in both of my machines, and I might even change that over to 143-degree spot pretty soon here, because now I'm changing a lot of my drills over to 130, 135-degree drills, and you always want a spot with a bigger angle than your drill is. So I I don't say won't say I'm against mill drills because I've used them for so long, but like I just there are so many better solutions out there. I've got a tipped off 1/8 inch chamfer mill. I've got a tipped off 3/8 chamfer mill, and then I've got my spot, and that's how I handle holes and chamfers.
All right, let's see how many more we can get through here because I have to run shortly.
Oh yeah. So Josh Hacko from Nicholas Hacko Watch Company asked, product versus service, machining for others versus making your own product. What's better and why?
Machining for others versus me. Depends on what you want to do, I feel like.
Well, and I feel like he's coming at this because he also has this battle. Like they, from what I've seen on his page and all of that, like they make their own watches now, and have assembled their own watches, but also service other watches. So I think that he's also gone through this, which is
Yeah.
pretty cool. Um, I think you would probably know a little bit more than I would because you actually have a product line.
One thing I will say that stuck out to me, there's a NPR How I Built This podcast about the guy that started, what was it, Otterbox? Yeah. And how he bought out an injection molding company, and it was a job shop injection molding company, and he was realizing that his success was dependent on his customer success. So if Payton comes along and says, "Hey, Dylan, I see you have this injection molding job shop. Can you make 100,000 of these Lego guns?" And then all of a sudden, you make 100,000 of them, and you're expecting 100,000 every month, and then I die off, and there goes that one order that you were banking on, or it's so dependent on the customer's success. So he switched gears and started making products because he's like, if I can market these, like I'm in control of how well I sell these and like how many I sell. And like, so it's kind of, and same thing with machining, I might get a job for machining, or Dylan might get a machining job. And, that's the profit right there. It's like, yes or no, do you want the job? And maybe you could make more if you had a product and you could sell more. And, it's just, whatever you want to do.
Yeah, I think it's personally like my ideal company has a balance of both, because on the flip side of that, you're also spending money and time in R&D and product development and all that stuff, whereas like with job shop work, like you said, here is the part, it is already designed, do you want it, how much is it going to cost me? And so like there's a nice simplicity about that, like what you're getting into up front. I know you, and I know a lot of other people have started or have companies like this, product companies have started down product lines and then realized like, oh shoot, I drastically underestimated, I don't know, the coding cost or the machining time or the complexity or all that stuff, and then so you have to scrap all of that time and cost to pretty much nothing, or find a way to pivot. So like I think there's a really good, for both of us, like a good balance. Like I really want to have at least a couple products. If I could keep a mill busy like even a week a month with something that's my own, that my own tolerances, and I only have me to answer to, that would be a dream, because then it's like extra money in my pocket, easier. I still have to figure out e-commerce and all that stuff, but at least there is that stability to fall back on. But at the same time, I do like the simplicity side of the job shop work, where it's like, just make money because I'm not making any of the design decisions.
Yeah, pros and cons.
Yeah. Stefan Gotteswinter from actually real quick, I wanted to shout out both a previous guest of ours, Adam, and Joshua's podcast, the Precision Microcast. If you're not listening to it, definitely go check it out. It's like super niche, tiny, super accurate machines. And it's super cool because every week they have like a precision problem of the week that they've encountered, and like some of them are on the scale that like I don't think I'll ever encounter that kind of stuff. And so it's if you're into machining, you're into like super oddball machines or oddball techniques, definitely go give them a listen. And then speaking of podcasts, Stefan from the Home Shop Machinist podcast asked, "How do you decide between a proper fixture and a cobbled together setup, especially on a low quantity part that might or might not come back? Constantly fighting the setup or spending a few minutes extra?"
If it can be done simply and maybe a little janky with just parallels and I don't know, just a basic setup, I for low quantity stuff, I just power through it. Um, I've had parts that I thought I could get away with that, like just in smooth jaws, and ended up making a dedicated fixture because I was fighting it flexing. So if if there's no foreseeable problems, I would just do it the quick and dirty way.
Lately, I haven't had the luxury of enough time that if any things go wrong that I can recover from it, like and not be late. So I very often err on the side of safe and make a fixture, even if it's just a quick fixture. Or I make soft jaws for everything. Like I make soft jaws for parts that I could probably capture in hard jaws. But I just know that like I'm not gonna screw around with locating them against a stop or having them move or anything like that. And it's like screw it, I'm just gonna cut soft jaws real quick. I go through a lot of soft jaws, and like thankfully I can recut them and reuse them quite a bit. Like I use them until they look like Swiss cheese. And actually, I think that maybe this is coming from Stefan posted a picture of like a copper part or some kind of part on, I think it was on the Discord, maybe it was on Instagram, and it was like using Swiss cheese soft jaws more or less. Um, but yeah, I very often will go at least a little bit safer. Like I won't make a full fixture. Like very often I'll make a fixture on top of a plate that I have not cut the sides or the bottom on. I'll just clamp it in like the Sarah jaws, cut all of my locating features, drill and tap for all of my clamps, and then just use it once and throw it away. And so I'm not wasting a whole bunch of time making it a perfect fixture, like a tooling fixture that I can go back to, but it's secure enough that I can at least get through the run on my parts with zero fallout. All right, so this was a good one. Terry CMA05 asked, "How do you manage time off as a small business owner? Do you shoot to have a minimum billable hours per month and work in taking days off from there? Take days off when you can between jobs, or have set dates that you will not run your business?"
It's definitely a balance. You want to start with that?
Yeah, sure. So I have zero schedule, especially because it's my second full time job. So I take breaks when I can, or sometimes when I probably shouldn't, but when I'm burnt out, and I just work as hard as I can to get everything done, and then if there's time to take off there, then take it off then. But
Yeah, like we were kind of talking about earlier, Dylan getting out of his, hole of work that he's in and just getting a couple days of breathing room. I feel like it just kind of like it comes in ebbs and flows. And like sometimes it's just going to be like extremely busy and you just have to deal with it. And then there's going to be those weeks where it's like, what the heck? Like, where is everyone type thing? And that's where you just, like we've talked about, you just take the time off when you can and, you know, just kind of it, you kind of are as an entrepreneur, I feel like, especially with what we do, kind of a service industry, your breaks are kind of dictated by the work coming in, um, and just kind of what's going on in the world in general, really, especially with what's going on now.
yeah, well, and completely your physical well being too. Like last weekend, I definitely shouldn't have, but I took all of Saturday off.
Mm-hmm.
I like woke up and was like, "Oh, I'll go to the shop." Like I was at the shop all of Friday. I was like, "Oh, I'll go to the shop," and then I ate breakfast and went on a run, and I was like, "Nah, I'm just gonna stay home all day." And like
Yeah.
it was so needed, like because I was at the shop every single day last week, and I'll probably be at the shop every single day except for today. Um, this week. So it's occasionally even if it's unadvisable, you just kind of have to do it just to maintain sanity and mental health and physical health and all that stuff. So,
Yeah, and I was thinking one thing I didn't talk about that I said I would is the whole 75 hard thing, but let's do these questions first, and then I can talk about that because I think that really caught me off guard, and I had a couple people reach out to me on Instagram because they were like, "I didn't know Grimsmo did it, and I didn't know you did it, and you haven't even talked about it." So let's do that at the end, but that's kind of part of this, I would say.
oh yeah, for sure. Um, this the one from Opal dude is I think definitely. Well, I guess I can answer too, but you are the Lego guy. So he asked, "Did you have Mega Blocks as a kid? If so, why?" You know, he gives examples: better themes, better value, or were they gifts?
I did have them, but I did not prefer them. Um, I mean, it's kind of interesting because like that's kind of my total realm of like there's a lot that I'm sure our listeners don't know about like the whole different between the brands. Like there's a couple like themes like this is getting just totally into it, but Lego did this test run of SpongeBob sets and Avatar sets. So two like cartoons and I think there was one more, I can't remember, but it was like a competition and whoever sold the most out of those two themes they would continue doing. And actually Mega Bloks ended up getting the license for SpongeBob, and then obviously Mega Bloks is huge for like Call of Duty, and Lego doesn't do anything military related, and that's kind of why I exist. Um, and so yeah, I mean, I had some. It's a totally different system, I would say. Lego is a very specific system on how everything interacts, and Mega Bloks is a little more willy nilly. And the quality of Mega Bloks is just not even close to Lego.
Right. Yeah, I don't think I've ever owned a Mega Block set.
Good, keep it that way.
Like, I was gifted when I was 6 or 5 or something. My babysitter gave me a massive tub of probably, I don't know, thousands and thousands of Lego pieces, like all of the sets and all of the packages and everything he's ever collected over the years. And I think I still have them. Like, it's like, you think of like the biggest tubs that you can buy at like Costco or Walmart or anything like that, and it was one of those full of Legos. And
Damn.
so, but I think my parents were like, well, he's already deep into this ecosystem. Like, why would we buy him Mega Blocks?
Exactly, yeah.
So, yeah, I have zero opinion on them. Just be more the fact that I never had them. So, um, yeah,
Yeah, that's an interesting question though.
well, go ahead and grab another one.
Let's see. Let's do Smith Machine and Tool said you had a guest on the past few months who was talking about trash or was talking trash on the Deuce on Mill turns, or that may have been one of you guys at your day job. Can you elaborate more on why you agreed with the dislike of the mill turns and Deuce on specifically? I can't. I feel like that was just us, especially you in general, just not liking your Deuce on at work. Was that right?
I didn't like the mill, but the mill turns was Jake Yates. So
Oh
they have,
yeah,
I think he said two at his day job, and they've had nothing but problems.
huh?
And I've never run one. I haven't heard great things. Like, I want to say that somebody on the Discord also said a very similar sentiment. Yeah, my thing was just like I didn't like the mills because I thought it was kind of a poor integration between the Fanic and Doosan side, and like I didn't feel like Doosan did a fantastic job of that. But yeah, I know Jake was saying that their mill turns were just really weak. I know that their 2 and 3 axis lathes are like industry standards as far as non super high dollar machines go. Like, if you're
Yeah,
looking for like a run of the mill lathe, Doosan lathes you can't go wrong with. Like, even Jay, he loves Haas everything and still has Doosan lathes. I mean, I guess he just got that Haas lathe, but um, like they're just super solid normal lathes. But yeah, from what Jake was saying and from what somebody else was saying, their mill turns are kind of lacking in the rigidity and quality department.
yeah. I mean, I've had no experience with mill turns other than just a normal lathe, and I've had no complaints, like you said, about the normal lathe stuff. So
Yeah.
then he also asks the drill index you bought, Dylan. just the case, or does the case come included with all the bits?
Oh yeah, so that was Jonathan Anderson. He had 3 questions. So the drill index I bought is a Viking slash Norseman drill set. Viking and Norseman are the exact same company, and I actually emailed them about this because I was looking at them, and when I was on the Viking website, I searched the Viking part number and can only find Norseman sets. And I emailed them. I was like, "Hey, what's the difference?" Like, I went to both their websites and their addresses are exactly the same, and I was like, "Well, clearly it's the same company. So like, why the different name?" And he was like, "Oh well, what did he say?" He was like, "Oh, Norseman is more for like the maintenance repair community, and Viking is just for the Viking community." I was like, "What the hell is that supposed to mean?" So anyway, I bought that set, but it's a Huot or Huo, however you pronounce that
Is it
drill.
Hewitt? I don't know.
I don't know either. Hewitt, I guess that makes sense because it's an American company. Um, so yeah, Hewitt drill index with Viking Norseman drills, and it was the full thing for like $298, I think. It's a 118 piece set.
Okay.
And what's super cool about the index too, like the actual box, is that it has the metric number and then the decimal equivalent for every drill too, which is like super handy for someone who is not fluent in metric.
So this is an all metric kit.
Yeah. So I already have an all um, English or Imperial set, or whatever you want to call it, from Morse that I got through Mari Tool for around the same price. I want to say theirs is like 250, 260.
Yeah, I
And
got the same one after you told me about it, and it's great.
yeah, so I love that set. I've used, like, I posted the Viking set, and somebody was like, "Well, I think it's probably better money to just buy the ones that you use often." But like, I've used 80% of the drills in that Morse set at one point or another since I bought it.
Oh yeah,
Um,
and they're sharp and they're just real nice.
yeah, and they like I replace them when they get dull, or when I use them on steel for a lot, like a large run of steel parts, I'll replace them or something. But um, for the most part, they're fantastic. But I've got now 2 customers. One customer is completely metric, and one customer is half metric. And like, there are those occasional odd sizes that are just impossible to do right with imperial sets. So like 3.1 millimeter, I think it is 129.9, and I was trying to hold plus or minus 2 on that, and the closest you can get is a 128.5 drill, which already puts you pretty far out, and then it was drilling 128 because it was in plastic, and so like I was right on the limit of tolerance, and like it was in. I checked it 3 different ways, gauge pins. I checked it with over under on with an indicator on a height gauge, but that there was just like it just bothered me, and so I was
Yeah,
like,
just a
screw it.
little scary.
Yeah, well, and there's a few like metric drills, or not metric drills, metric taps, that the form tap requires a metric tap drill. Like the closest one, like if I want to stick to like 60 to 65% thread before tapping, or thread percentage before tapping, the nearest one would either put me at like 80% or 50%. That always has bothered me, so I've always like drilled it under and then circularly interpolated it bigger. And so now I can just drill it, and so it'll save me a whole operation, save me from sizing the holes, all that stuff. And the drills look super high quality, made in America, all that fun stuff. So
I could see how that set would be really useful because I know you do a bunch of metric stuff, and I'm slowly getting more metric stuff here and there. A lot of, like you said, form tapping or whatever. And, I am doing what that other guy suggested is, buying a drill with the tap when you get it. And, like, yeah, that's fine, but it'd just be nice to have the whole thing just ready to go. Don't have to think about it and don't have to order any drills. You just buy the tap.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I've got, I don't know, I've got a ton of metric taps too. Like, I've got most of what I need for most jobs that come across my desk now. It's usually like the larger sizes that I either have to buy a tap for, or thread mill or something like that. But yeah, it was just it was bothering me enough, and I had been talking to Brad about it, like, I don't know, for 6 months or something now, and we've always been like, oh yeah, we need to find one. And like, I had looked on MSC, but they only had a uh, dormer set, I want to say, or something like that, and it was 500 or 600 bucks. And I was like, I don't want to spend that much. And then I got a Viking inch set. It was like 1/16 to 3/8 in 16th increments from Xometry. They had like a flash sale 2 weeks ago. I think it was $30 or something like that. And I was like, oh, why not? And then when I got the set, I was like, oh man, these look really, really high quality, made in America. All ticks all the boxes and all that stuff. And I was like, well, maybe I'll check them out. And then I went through their catalog and found exactly what I wanted. And like I said, I think it was 280 or something like that, shipped. And so I was like, yeah, that's a half off of the nearest thing I can find. Just get it.
It sounds, and all the people listening that are entrepreneurs, especially machine shops, will get this, but at our size, like you said, $600, like that's like you have to think about that purchase decision. But like, I mean, even a $60 decision out on a limb is like, I mean, those add up so quickly on a day to day, for a monthly bill. And so it's like, you know, you really got to just be sure. But like you said, and it just makes total sense. If you're doing that so often, and I mean, you could have kept buying individual drills and it would have added up over time to that set price of, 200 so dollars. So, I mean, it's just one of those things that it's just, you got to take everything into account, especially when buying stuff.
Yeah. Well, one thing else I'll say about drills, if you don't have to go more than like 5 or 600 thou, and you're looking for a cheap, good way to make quality holes, and you don't have like a large collet variety or whatever, I've had such good luck with carbide circuit board drills, like from MSC.
Okay.
They're carbide, usually parabolic flute, I want to say, and they're like between 5 and 600 thou flute length on an 1/8 inch shank or a 2 or 3 millimeter shank. Um, and they're
So
like,
they're all like stepped down from that shank size.
yeah, yeah, and then you've got a really good flute length on it, and they're like $3 or something like that.
I remember you telling me about that.
Yeah, I use them all the time. Like whenever I have um, smaller sized holes, like if you look at my like little carbide uh, sizes that I've got like, 3/4 of a millimeter to like 2.1 millimeters, and like I don't know, a whole bunch of different sizes within that range that I've bought over the years, because it's like, well, yeah, I could use like a number, I don't know, whatever, 60 drill or whatever, but then I've got to have a collet that holds that size, a collet for a 40 thou drill or a 30 thou drill or a 20 thou drill, and I've got to, indicate it, make sure it's, I'm clamping it all right, and like clamping on tiny shanks like that is always tough to gauge torque on the collet and all that stuff. Whereas like these, you just load them in an 1/8 inch collet and go, and like the run out is great, the whole quality is great. I knock on wood, I want to say I've never broken one yet. And like, granted, I'm not using them on steel or whatever, but to punch a 600 thou deep 30 thou hole is pretty good in 10, 15 parts, something like that.
In aluminum?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
I'm
Yeah.
sure they work probably pretty well in steel too. They are carbide, but yeah, it's. I think for the money, if you're like I said, if you're not drilling past about 5 or 600 thou, they are like super good for the money. And MSC has. Usually I buy the Kyocera brand ones, and they've got them in like every single increment you could ever want on there. So definitely a good hack if you're looking for a good solid drill for small sizes.
Yeah. Yeah. Good little tidbit there.
Yeah, and then Jonathan also asked, "What brand of twist drills do you like for aluminum?" Both of us use the Morse set. I don't really buy anything aluminum specific right now. I know parabolic flutes are like way better for aluminum, and you can peck less and drill deeper. But for me, it's more having things on hand and not having to order, especially with tight turnarounds. Like if I only got a week, especially lately, like MSC has been so garbage at shipping anything on time. Well,
Yeah.
it's not even MSC. MSC has been taking a little longer, and then UPS has just been so god awful lately. I can't stand them. I know there's a lot of people that hate FedEx, but you know what? Every single package I've shipped during COVID has come in on time on FedEx, and 80% of my UPS ones get delayed at least a day.
Yeah, I was about to say I've been doing a lot of overnighting lately, and luckily there's a money back guarantee because you spend $30 or $40 to overnight a little box, and it it was supposed to get there the next day, but it got there the following morning after, and luckily I can just go back to the post office and be like, okay, I guess I get my money back, but a day is a day, so
Right. Yeah. Yeah, you're like, I would have paid for the $10 shipping otherwise.
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah. And then what type of plastic is your favorite to machine? Um, I guess probably Delrin so far. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say Delrin. Delrin's. I mean, I'm trying to think what else I've actually worked with.
Peak is pretty nice. It chips at the corners a little bit if you run it too aggressively, but it holds dimensional size really, really well, just like Delrin. Teflon's kind of a pain. It like has reverse wear. Like I've had to like positive comp a lot of tools or drill way bigger than I thought because like everything shrinks on you. And then I'm just about to machine some HDPE this week. Thankfully, everything's like super wide tolerances, but it, at least on my saw, cuts like butter. So I'm expecting a very Teflon-y experience.
Yeah, I've worked with acrylic before. That has its own challenges, which actually makes it adds just a whole new level to machining and the way you think about like tool paths because you can't like chip out corners and how you face it is kind of fun. But I'm trying to think that Delrin and um I think that's it. Yeah.
Actually, acrylic was the first time I ever used a Harvey tool at
Okay.
my first job. Like it was like maybe the fourth or fifth job I had ever programmed on my own and set up was this acrylic job where we were routing out they kind of looked like door handles almost like a not a door handle but like a door loop almost like maybe one of those the COVID keys or whatever you want to call them the
Yeah.
virus hooks. It looks like just the part you put your finger in.
Okay.
And we were trying to cut them with a normal 2 flute end mill and just cracking them like crazy. And so I did some research and I was like, oh, I think a downcut plastic, single flute end mill would do this. And we went from like, I don't know, 20 inches a minute or something like that, or 10 inches a minute to like 70 inches a minute and holding
Wow.
size and not cracking anything. And my boss was like, wow, where did you get this? And I was like, oh, this place called Harvey Tool. And like, I had zero idea how awesome they would be or how instrumental they would be to me later. But yeah, it was the first time I'd ever been introduced to them.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Let's
Um,
see. Then yeah, so those ones are done. And then we got one from or actually two or no.
oh, yeah.
Yeah.
From Zimstar or
Yeah, we got the first one up top. I know it's probably too late, but I just wanted to get some other people's thoughts on, or maybe bring up the topic for the podcast. I have a Bridgeport milling machine. Should I convert it to CNC, or should I look into buying something like a mini mill or some other small CNC?
uh, when I read that, I mean, it depends on your budget. Like if you've got the money to buy a mini mill, or you've got the work to support, buying part of a mini mill and financing it, that's very clearly to me the right way to go. But like if you're just trying to bootstrap it and you just are screwing around in your garage and just want something CNC, then you're going to spend heaps less on a CNC conversion. I mean, maybe not heaps less. Like I know some of the Centroid conversion kits are really expensive, but like a mini mill will be infinitely more rigid than a Bridgeport conversion and more useful, I think, for like 3D machining and stuff like that.
I think it comes down to two things: budget and what do you want to do with it. I mean, if you're doing job shop stuff, um, definitely go mini mill. I mean, and then it kind of comes down to what kind of parts you want to be making if you're doing job shop work. But I mean, yeah, I mean, if you got the money, like Dylan said, I'd just go straight into it if you're really being serious about this, or if you have a product you're trying to do, and you know you have the numbers of and quantities of parts to back it. I would highly suggest skipping that step of the kind of lower end machines if you can. It's a lot of people they can't skip that step, which is totally understandable. But if you can, you know, good example, like I started with a tag and I thought about upgrading to like a Tormach, but then I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna skip this whole phase and I'm gonna keep saving up and I'm just gonna go straight into my end goal being a Haas, and I think that was like the best decision. So yeah, I would go with a mini mill.
Yeah, yeah, and you actually brought up a good point. It really depends on the work you're doing too. Like if you're if you're doing modifications or remachining for people, like if they're bringing you, I don't know, machine parts off of tractors or cars or whatever, and you're just popping a hole in them, or maybe just contouring a radius for them, just CNC or Bridgeport. But like if you're making billet parts from scratch all the time and wanting to make, small production runs or lots of prototypes, yeah, it's, if you can afford it, definitely step up to a smaller VMC.
Yeah, or if you're just wanting to have a cooler mill other than just a normal manual mill in your garage just to dink around, then that's, that I would just do the Bridgeport. But yeah.
Yeah. Though I will say, having two CNCs right now, I would love a manual mill in the corner, just
Yep,
to like
I know.
pop holes in the side of things or little stuff like that.
Yep, there's
Um,
always going to be a place for those.
oh yeah. And then his other question was, is Chinese carbide worth a damn in any situation? $21 for a quarter inch carbide end mill too much, or am I just a cheapskate?
Huh. I mean, what's the price of, I feel like a helical end mill carbide quarter inch is like the same price, so I would just go with that.
I think he's saying that like helical and those for 21 for a quarter inch is too much for him, or he thinks
Oh,
it's too much
I
versus
don't
like,
think so.
the Chinese stuff where it's like $5 for a quarter inch end mill or whatever.
I would go straight with the quality stuff. Even if, you know, your budget's an issue, I'm telling you. And honestly, a quarter inch end mill, you can do so much with that. And for $20, if that's like hurting the bank, then I mean, I don't know. I would not trust a $5 end mill. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah, I think especially in carbide, like people see carbide as like one material, but it is so varying between the different manufacturers. You've got like fine grain, super fine grain, different compositions, different amount of cobalts. Like you are paying for not only superior grinding techniques, and proprietary grinds and things like that, but you're also paying for higher end carbide that is stiffer and stronger and stays sharp longer. Because when it comes down to it, like if you look like microscopically at the cutting edge of these tools, the finer the grain of the carbide, the finer the cutting edge can be. So I don't know. Like I one of the reasons that Brad and I even started Proteum was that like we got tired of working at places that cheaped out on carbide. Like it makes your job so much harder. Like the last shop I worked at would, like if I needed a quarter inch, like let's say I needed a quarter inch end mill with a 30 thou radius, they would take someone that the quarter inch end mill that had been used 8 times already and was starting to dull, and then hand stone a 30 thou radius on it and be like,
Jeez.
there you go, good enough. And it's like, no, it's not. Like, or the prime example of that was the last job I worked on before I left was a group of 4130 parts, and we turned up some blanks real quick from the stock that we got, and then nobody told me or the lathe programmer that all of the rest of the stock was going out and it was going to be hardened to 55 to 60 Rockwell, I want to say. And when I found out, I ordered like, I don't know, I want to say like $80 worth of AccuPro. Like I was like, oh, I'll order the absolute cheapest stuff I can find. And they like threw a fit. They were like, how dare you, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, this has got to be like a $30,000 or $40,000 order. And you're worried about $80 so that I can get through it. Like what are you talking about? They're like, oh, we've got stuff in the bins, blah blah blah, and it's like, no, you've got like a bunch of chewed up 4 flute end mills. Like, we're not going to make any money if you want me to try to chew through that stuff. So, yeah, I'm looking right now, like a quarter inch Illumigator finisher is like $24, and like for me that's cheap because I think the Destiny one is probably a little like $3 or $4 more. Um, but you would just really get what you pay for. I know that as a hobbyist, it's a lot harder to stomach that kind of thing because you're not like seeing a return on your investment. But if your speeds and feeds are right and your programming is right, it will last you infinitely longer than a Chinese end mill.
Yeah, I mean, I know plenty of people that have been running similar tools for many, many years, and they still are chugging along in aluminum, like no problem.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, this is a rougher, so it's not apples to apples, but like our Diamondback rougher and the Kitty ran for what 2.5 years, something like that,
Yep.
and like it's still there. We just don't use it.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's buying good carbide pays off for sure.
Yeah. Interesting question though.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And really maybe ask that question to the guys over at like Chris and Ed and everybody over at the DFX podcast, because like they come from the hobby background whereas we don't, and so like they might have completely different opinions and they might have a really good source for Chinese carbide that I'm not thinking of. Like Winston does a whole bunch of hobby stuff with uh, nomads and all that stuff. So he might have a fantastic source for Chinese carbide for all I know. But yeah, I feel like maybe we're the wrong audience for this question, or we just don't have the experience with it that they would.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, they might be like, "Oh yeah, buy from this one sketchy eBay seller, and his tools are actually really good." Like, I have no idea. I just don't assume that stuff.
Yeah. Well, and I think that we don't really have like we don't have the leeway where I can experiment with that. Like if I've got an end mill that blows up on a customer part, I might have a setup piece, but like I'd rather just not.
Yep.
I can't chance it. So yeah. And then one, I think the last one was from Sithek Customs, and I thought this was a really good one. And I think like we've talked him and I over DM, and he's had to do CMM reports, so I think that's where this kind of stems from. So he asked, when you make customer parts that don't ask for formal inspection documents, do you just package up their parts and say thanks? Do you document internally and file away? Do you charge extra if they want the formal inspection or CMM report?
You can start this off.
So I definitely don't document if they don't ask for it. I inspect all of the parts 100% usually before they leave, unless it's a plus or minus 20 dimension, and then I check 1 in 5 or something like that. But like that's just so much more overhead than I'm willing to support for free and for no reason. Like if we've ever had, like I think we've had two quality issues in 5 years. One of them, what happened? One of them, like the print didn't call out something, and it ended up being completely fine. But they were like, "Well, technically it should have been like this, but it was all fine." And then I want to say the other one, oh, the other one wasn't even our fault. Like we made it to spec, and then their connectors were out of spec, and so we had to recut it. But like we really stringently inspect our parts before they leave, and so I know they're good, but I'm not going to maintain documents for customers that don't pay for it. And then to the second part of it, I most certainly will charge for a formal inspection or CMM report. If they are asking for like a fare, like an AS9100 fare, I'm definitely going to have that as a billable item on the PO. But if they just need first articles or anything like, or not first articles, but you know, they need inspection documents with it, I will either roll it into the part price or separate it out if I'm trying to dissuade them from that notion. But I'm always willing to do first articles. I've got one customer that comes by for first articles. I've had to send out first articles, like do 5 of these pieces and then do 400 of them. But yeah, it's like there is a reason that aerospace parts are so expensive, and it's because like you have to have
Labor.
2 or 3 full-time people, like in a real like big aerospace shop, or not even big, like a small aerospace shop. You have to have like a handful of people that are full-time just in inspection, doing documentation and inspection. And like I'm not about support, like I'm not going to support that overhead for zero reason. Like if they don't ask for it, I'm not going to do it. I keep my gauges up to date, I like and calibrated, because a few of my customers want, and like I do things like that. But yeah, I'm not going to do work for nothing. I know that I ship good parts. If there's ever an issue, I will have them send it back, or I'll make them again. Or if they're a local customer, I'll go over there and inspect them with them.
Yep, I've done pretty much all of the above. Like you said, there's some guys that'll be like, "Hey, before we run 200 parts, can you make a couple, send them to me?" ship them, or luckily a lot of my local guys I can just drive out to 30 minutes, 20 minutes away and be like, all right, let's test fit this right here right now. And they might be, a lot of the guys I work with are up and coming and smaller shops. So it's like, oh, let's maybe make this chamfer bigger just so it looks nice, or do this, let's make this deeper, or all that. And, I normally, when I'm doing, because like I said, I'm more of a small production shop. So like if I'm getting a run of 100 parts, I have a setup piece, I run it, and then I inspect it. Like I print out a print. I love paper. Like I don't know. I guess I could go paperless, but that's a whole nother topic. And I'll sit down and inspect all the dimensions and just write down with like a red pen, um, if I need to like adjust anything or get closer to nominal. But you know, I don't. I've never had a customer ask for that. I've had RFQs that ask for that, and normally I turn it down because it's such a complicated part that I wouldn't even want to deal with inspecting it, let alone making it. Um, and I'm
Yeah.
trying to think,
Well, and I did like work for an online parts handling website, and like one of their things was that like for a while every part had to go out with a bubbled print and either a sample set or something like that. And that was one reason that I stopped doing a whole lot of work for them. Is like, I had to buy software. I bought Inspection Expert to bubble drawings because bubbling them in like Notepad or whatever just takes forever. I had to like print out fair documents or something like that, or a dip, so that I could record all my results. And like, it sometimes, depending on how many pages of the print there was, it would like double my time on the job. And I was like, I'm not doing this. And like, they weren't paying for it either. And I think they've recently kind of rolled that back. But yeah, like I think people really underestimate inspection and deburring. Like
there's
that
a
will,
reason there's a whole department for these larger companies for those two things.
and even in those companies, I think that like parts go to debur and inspection to die. Like they will be on time, ready to go. Everybody thinks they're perfect, and then they'll get to like debur and they'll get to inspection, and like they'll find issues with them that need rework, or they'll find things that debur scratched or dinged, or like that is like a prime example of like the hidden costs in manufacturing is the human side of it.
Touching
And
it.
also, yeah, touching it, and then also inspecting it, because like, yeah, it's a nightmare, or it can be a nightmare.
Anytime a human picks something up, there's huge risk.
Yeah, yeah, totally. So um long long story long, no, I don't do any of that formal inspection document unless they pay for it, and I make sure that they know they're paying for it, unless it's like, unless it's worth my while to roll it in. It's the same conversation we've had before about NRE charges. Like if it's a large enough production run that I want to get, I'll roll the fixture costs into the part. But if it's 30 parts and they're like, oh, I promise I'll come back with 100, and it's like, well, then you're going to pay an NRE charge so that I can make the fixture for that next 100. But if you don't come back, I still covered my ass. So
I remember at my first job when I was running the Sugami Swiss machines, and I mean, like you mentioned, this was a while ago. I think it was 80 employees there. So, like you mentioned, this was early podcast. You mentioned like that's more of a manufacturing plant than it is like a shop, and it really was. And setting up a Swiss to run a couple parts, you check them with mics and comparators and all that stuff, and then you have to send it to the fancy room where it takes like 3 hours to inspect this tiny little bushing. Um, and it's like I could have ran the whole 300 parts by the time you guys were done. And it's just, I don't know, that it's just a weird system in my opinion. I understand it for certain parts, but it's just, yeah, it's just the way it is, I guess.
yeah, yeah, it's necessary. Well, it's necessary because a lot of companies say it's necessary, and because
Exactly.
a lot of government contracts require that it's necessary, and there needs to be this entire paperwork trail and blah blah blah. And like, yeah, I'm trying to keep my business and my nose out of that kind of stuff as much as I can, just because I know what a nightmare it is, and I know I just don't like it. I really 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 don't like it. I think it's you can make a lot of money doing it, but it's like, it's just such a headache. I like making parts. I don't like filing paperwork and having, you know, RCCA meetings or MRB meetings or whatever. Like it's no fun.
Yeah, I mean, manufacturing as it is already like 80% problem solving, 20% making parts, and I want more of that making parts, and I don't want to be that being taken away by inspecting and documenting.
Yeah, yeah. Keep the alphabet soup out of my shop. I want to
Yeah.
make stuff. I don't want to alphabet soup it. So, um, yeah. So anyway, that kind of concludes our questions. But I've got a couple of things to chat about, and you also wanted to talk more about 75 hard because yeah, you kind of dropped you and Grimsmo dropped that
Yeah.
bomb last week. So when did you start? How's it going? How far in are you? All that stuff.
All right. So for people that don't know, this is a challenge that this guy named Andy Frisella came up with. He has his own podcast, and you can look that up on Google. And there's a whole podcast talking about it. Basically, it's 75 days of you got 5 things. You have to follow a diet, and that can be whatever you want. There's 2 45-minute workouts. One of them has to be outside no matter what. You have to take a progress picture of yourself. You have to drink a gallon of water and read 10 pages of a book. You can't do an audio book. Um, and if you fail any of these tasks, you start over on day one. So, and then no alcohol or cheat meals. That's kind of like an add on thing. And so I started on June 8th. And so I'm on day 15 now. I'm looking at my little notes here. So I've done it for over 2 weeks and I like it. I think it's a cool system. I after this I'll go on a 45-minute walk. It's like a 3-mile walk and it takes exactly 45 minutes. And then I worked out this morning in the blazing. It was actually 90 degrees in Washington, which was hot. And I know Dylan's thinking that's cool, but that was hot.
Well, it's 97 right now at 9 o'clock at night. So
Yeah. Yeah, and it's yeah. That
but
was
no,
like
90 degrees. You guys have a lot more humidity than we do. So 90 degrees is rough when there's humidity.
yeah, so I did work. I don't know. It's just I think it's a really cool program, like challenge, and like we were talking about with John, it's more of a mental thing, really. And like John mentioned, you really do have to it takes like 2 hours out of your day because 2 45-minute workouts plus I'm a slow reader, so 10 pages might take me like 20 minutes. And then the gallon of water, I do that naturally. Follow the diet, that's just a mental thing. But yeah, I'm excited, and it was really cool to see John that he had been doing it for so long and that he was very enthusiastic about the results and he seemed to love it. And he was texting me about it. He was like, "I'm so glad you're doing it." And I'm like, "Yeah." And he was like, messaged me on when I posted on Instagram. I was on like a walk. No, I was doing a workout at like 3:30 in the morning the other night.
Yeah, you've been up late, dude.
Yeah, I got home at like 3 and I'm like, I still got to do this workout. I guess I'm staying up till 4.
Oh man.
So I guess I'm living the young life or something. But yeah, so that's the challenge. I encourage anyone to try it. But yes, it does take, I'd say 2 hours every day, but it's good for you. There's nothing bad about this. It's mental strengthening and physical. So I think it's good all around.
Yeah, totally. And like, I mean, I think I've been saying it since an early episode. Like, I find exercise at a minimum to be like such a stabilizer to my mood and my energy levels. It's so important to me, and it might not be for you, but if you're pulling double duty being an entrepreneur and you're like struggling with energy levels or mental stability sometimes, like we all do, I definitely recommend even just like a 10-minute workout or something like that. Like it really puts me in a better headspace.
Yeah, it's a big deal.
Yeah, for sure. Well, it's awesome, man. I'm pumped for you.
Yeah, it's been fun. So we'll see on I think it's August 22nd I'll be done.
Oh man, that
Which is
seems
going to
like
be here like tomorrow.
yeah, that's true. Like looking at the calendar right now, it's like, oh man, that seems like a really long way away, but it also feels like it was just January. So I guess that's fair.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when we were starting to talk about COVID, that felt like yesterday, but
Oh man, that's true. Yeah, that's so true.
yeah.
Oh, that's so weird.
Didn't mean to scare you there.
Yeah. Oh, we didn't do our segment of what did you research this week?
Oh. Um
Well, you've been reading anything good?
yeah, actually there's this one guy, and a lot of people probably have heard of him, Gary V. Um,
Hmm.
he made this book a while ago called Crush It, and then he did a sequel called Crushing It, and I'm reading the sequel. I haven't read the first one yet. And I guess part of the 75 hard challenge is the book you have to read. I think there was a requirement it can't be fiction. It has to be like entrepreneur or like health and wealth, like, or like it had to be like a legit book.
Right.
Um,
Personal development, I think, is what somebody said.
yeah. And so I've had this one, I've never read it, and I'm like halfway through it. And it's an interesting book because it's like firsthand accounts of these people taking like what you wouldn't think a business could be into like making really good money doing what they love. Um, and it just goes to show like anyone can do anything. And it's just crazy some of these stories in here. There's a lot of good let me find a quote in here. I mean, one guy turned just a little website he made just to like organize his research for studying for this architectural test, and turned that into a website that makes like $30,000 a month.
Ooh.
Um, and it's just like these little. It's just all out of nowhere, just random stuff. Um, I don't know. I'll have to find a quote and post it on Instagram. But let's see what's one here. This is a good one. You're literally giving up empty hours in favor of doing something that could fill your life up with joy, and you're worried about wasting time. If you're not 100% happy with your life, it's never a waste of time to try something that you could get. Try something that you could get. What is losing my spot? That you could get. That doesn't make sense. Get you there. Yeah, but I mean,
Yeah,
like
try something that could get you there too, like where you're being happy. That
exactly.
makes
Yeah,
sense.
and
Yeah.
like there's dog trainers, and there's the architecture one I thought was interesting. There's people that were selling like candy. I mean, one guy even got mentioned that coordinates Lego shows that I've gone to his shows and sold at his shows. It was kind of cool that he got mentioned. Um, but yeah, I mean, just interesting book. And then the next book after this, I'm definitely gonna read is the E Myth. I've had it. John told me to get that at IMTS, and he's like, "You need to read this," and I'm like, "Okay." Still haven't,
Yeah,
but
I keep hearing that book brought up. I'm sure I'll read it eventually. But yeah, that's cool.
yeah, I
That's
mean,
awesome, man.
I haven't really been researching much other than really, yeah, there's not much I can think of off the top of my head that's like something new. What about you?
I did a bit of 3D printer stuff this week. So I posted on Instagram. I finished my base for my Ender 3, and so far the prints are pretty awesome. I'm actually really happy with the base that I made. I've got some tweaks that I need to make to some locations on it and some of the adjustment screws and things like that. But overall, like the first layers are coming out super smooth and super consistent. And then I printed a new duct fan. So like I had that. I think I've said it on here. I had the bullseye duct from Pets Fang, or yeah, Pets Fang, I think is the person who designed it. But they had a second version of it that uses a bigger uh, part cooling fan or filament cooling fan, so you can actually print faster and at higher temperatures. And so I printed that Saturday when I was home, and just finished installing it yesterday. And I've printed a little bit with it today, and it's pretty awesome. So that has been a lot of research, and then I've been doing a ton of GD&T research for my day job. So
Really?
yeah, um, there's this whole so quality nerd alert right now, but um, there's this whole thing with true position where people misunderstand, like if there's an MMC modifier on the position itself, you can add bonus from the varying size of the feature itself. So like if you have bonus on a 125 plus or minus 5 hole, when you're at 130, you get 10 extra thou of true position tolerance. But there's this thing called datum shift, whereas when you have maximum material uh, symbols on the datums that are listed in that true position, and there's this big misconception by a lot of machinists that think like, oh, well, I can take the MMC from those datums and add it to my tolerance as well. And so they think like, oh, I can stack on the tolerance from A and from B and from C and my maximum material from my hole and add them all together, and I get like an extra 10 thou of true position, and like my hole's in. And that's like entirely incorrect. And so like we've had some issues pop up at work, and so I've been doing some deep dives on datum shift, because really what that means, like if you have an MMC or any kind of feature modifier on a datum in a true position, it means that like an MMC on a datum means that you can shift that datum. Like if there is, let's say one of your datums is like that same 125 hole and it's plus or minus 5,
Okay.
it means that there is a 120 thou pin in that datum, and you can shift that datum back and forth so that until it touches that pin. And if you can shift it along that pin and get your hole that you're checking in, then you're still good. And so like it's super hard to physically quantify this shift. Like you really have to use a CMM. There's no real hard and fast rules on how to do it on an open setup, and so we've been kind of doing some research into it and how to like correctly do it in an open setup or check it in an open setup, because we're having to recheck parts and things like that, and make sure that we're doing everything right, and make sure that the CMM is doing what it's doing right, and just kind of re-verify results, things like that. So it's it's super tough. Like GD&T, when you really get down to the nitty gritty stuff, is just really, really tough. And like, there's very few people out there that actually know what they're talking about. So finding any really good data is just super tough.
Which is
If
kind of
anybody,
scary.
oh, 100%. Well, and like, dude, like I deal with engineers all day, every day at every shop I've ever worked at that just do not know GD&T. Like they think they do, and they think they're applying it correctly, and then they do just super bonehead stuff, and you're like, dude, that's not how that works. And like, so then you're like super screwed, because you're like, well, you're interpreting it wrong, and if I interpret it right, maybe the part's out, or
Then
maybe it's
you
in.
start to question everything.
Right. Yeah, like GD&T is supposed to make making good parts easier, and man, sometimes when the engineer doesn't know what he's doing, it like just makes it harder for everybody involved. And like it's really tough when you get to like those levels of bureaucracy. Like in every shop I've worked at, I've encountered this, where it's like super tough to like with my shop, most of my customers I can just call up and be like, hey, what do you mean by this? Like I don't know what you mean, or what are you looking for here? What kind of tolerance are you trying to specify? But like when you're talking about inspection departments and receiving departments and buyers and sellers and blah 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 blah, like it's just so hard to finally get a sit down meeting and be like, hey buddy, like what are you talking about here? So yeah. Anyway, that's been a big topic of research this week for me. Like all around is like from what I've found so far, and if anybody listening to this knows any better, feel free to reach out and correct me. But like in some cases, you can shift half the amount of the bonus you have on the datums called out, because like technically, like again, that 125 hole, if the hole's 130 and your pin's 120, you can technically shift 5 thou in one direction, to hit that pin against that wall. So we're again quantifying a theoretical concept is just super hard without any direction from the standard, and from what I've found so far, I can't find any. So that's where I'm at.
I remember in school when we were learning about true position and like maximum material condition and all that, and just our instructor was like, he's like 60 something years old, and it was just a room full of like, I mean, I was the youngest, but like 20-year-olds up to 40-year-olds, and we were just like all struggling to grasp the concept. And once we all like understood it, we were like so hyped. We are like, we got this, like easy, like. But yeah, it is, talk about a deep dive that's kind of scary.
Oh yeah, yeah. And my goal, I think, this year at some point is just to start picking away at the standard and go through and read it all at least once, and then read some reference books and really really familiarize myself with it, because there's almost nobody that knows what they're doing with it. I need to know what I'm doing with it. Like, I need to know that I'm right on a lot of this stuff, and I've done things wrong for years before, and then realize it and been like, oh, like I that's I guess that's the good thing about especially my shop is like we try to make things at half the tolerance that we're given usually, and it's like, well, if I screw up the interpretation of something, usually sticking to half of the tolerance is not going to get me in trouble no matter what. So that's like another safety cushion.
Yeah, but I've seen it where it's, they make a bunch of parts that they think are bad, and then it's like, okay, maybe we don't know what we're doing with GD&T. Let's sit down. Oh, these are actually all totally in tolerance.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, I've said it before. I've gotten drawings 4 decimal places that are supposed to be plus or minus a half thou, and then you talk to them and they're like, oh, just some bolt goes in there. Just make it a
Yeah.
clearance hole. I don't care. Like, just make sure the head doesn't fall through. It's like, oh,
Ugh.
you garbage person. Like,
Needs to be concentric within.
yeah, yeah, exactly. So anyway, that's what I've been researching this week. That's probably maybe a decent place to wrap things up.
Yeah, have fun with GD&T, everybody.
Yeah, yeah, and for the most part, I know my way around it. So if you come across anything that you need help with, feel free to reach out on Instagram or through my email or anything like that. I'm happy to bang my head against the wall with you and help you through it, because it really at its base level, like properly applied GD&T is really not scary at all. It's super easy and it just makes making parts that much easier. But improperly or confusing GD&T just it's so frustrating.
And
So
on that note,
yeah, on that note, we will see you guys next week. I'm still working on our next round of shirts, and yeah, have a great week, guys.
all right, guys, see you next week.